And I also want to just introduce Mike Tesi. Mike is our Division Vice President for Pharmacy. And so I've asked Mike to join us on this call since he's been leading our vaccine planning efforts, working both locally with the state and public health officials, as well as with our national health system, Common Spirit. So just a couple of things, like I always do, is try to start you off where we are for the week. This morning we had 301 patients that were COVID positive. This is actually down about 10% from a week ago. Around 70 patients are in the ICU. Of that number, 37 were on ventilators. Looks like we've now seen a gradual decline in the number of hospitalized patients over the last couple of weeks, since about the 15th of November. Which is obviously great news. Let's just hope that trend continues. Previous call, I'd mentioned that we had implemented what we've described as a seasonal worker program, which is where we're actually hiring college students and others, quite frankly, for the next couple of months to help out in and around the hospitals. These roles are designed to free up our clinical staff so they can basically be doing nothing but taking care of patients. I'm happy to say that as of the start of this week, we'd already had 1,000 applicants for the 178 positions that we posted. And so we're going to begin, the HR teams will be making offers this week to start getting those folks on board, having them trained, obviously, so that they can begin helping out in the hospitals. The other piece of that is, as I mentioned before, we've called this our all hands on deck moment, and all of our administrative staff, so folks that aren't generally caregivers or involved directly in patient care, have been asked to volunteer to do some of these administrative tasks. So that could be a runner for one of the floors, which is a fancy way of saying a gopher, or actually working at our screening stations at the doors to our hospitals. We've filled hundreds of shifts with our teammates that generally aren't involved directly in the hospitals or patient care, and so we'll continue to do that for as long as needed. So today's topic, we want to talk about vaccines, the two vaccines that have been submitted for approval, the one by the company Pfizer, the other is the Moderna vaccine. Both are the same messenger RNA technology, which is a new platform. Mike might be able to speak a little bit to that in his comments. We're awaiting emergency use authorization. I think we, although don't have any inside information, are like all other healthcare systems. We expect that EUA to be granted, and that within the next week or two, we should begin receiving shipments of vaccines. The way our state is planning on distributing the vaccine is really focused on not only the high-risk populations, but the first responders, healthcare workers, and Mike can speak a little bit more to that. We do believe, and again, as you all are hearing, that probably by the end of the spring, early summer, that there should be plenty of vaccine available, and so that anybody that wants a vaccine should be able to be vaccinated by the time we get into the late spring. So with that, I'll just stop my comments and turn it over to Mike to let Mike Tesi give you a little bit of a background around our vaccine efforts and how we're prepared to be assisting through a large vaccination process that'll be forthcoming.
All right, thank you, Dr. Robertson. Just to tell you a little story of how we've gotten to this point with regard to our vaccine planning. We've kept our eyes on the progress with the vaccine since the late summer, early fall, and in September we really pulled our pharmacy leadership team together, understanding that the Pfizer vaccine is going to require some additional care and handling, storage and shipping of the product. And so we did assess our current needs. We determined that we would like to have, and we do, to add some ultra low freezers to our system. As we commented, one of the ultra low freezers arrived at CUMC Bergen Mercy yesterday and is at temp today as we speak. And it needs to be kept at minus 70 degrees Celsius or minus 94 degrees Fahrenheit for this vaccine. So very cold. That freezer can hold 200, very close to 250,000 doses. So almost 250,000 doses in that one freezer alone. We have another one planned to come to Good Sam, CHI Health Good Samaritan in sometime after Christmas. We have one currently located at CHI Health St. Elizabeth in Lincoln, and another one at CHI Health St. Francis in Grand Island. Altogether, today we can handle 432,000 doses of this vaccine at this time. And when the Good Sam freezer gets installed, I'll add another approximately 130,000 doses. So we have a great capacity to handle the ultra low Pfizer vaccine, store it and manage it. It can be stored for 6 months at these ultra low temperatures. We know that Pfizer is going to the FDA on December 10th for the emergency use authorization. We are hopeful and expect that it'll be approved, and the product should ship sometime the week of December 14th. And if all goes well, sometime during that week, we'll start administering some doses. Moderna, the other leading vaccine for COVID-19, is seeking emergency use authorization December 17th from the FDA. And we are working through the governor's plan, the state's plan with regard to phase 1, phase 1B, et cetera, and who is going to be the primary folks that we are going to provide the vaccine to. We've also done work here to look at prioritization in our own sites and in such areas such as the burn unit at St. Elizabeth's, our critical care units, and others. And so we've done a great deal of work with our employee health folks. There's been a team of them also working through the process and how we're going to vaccinate all of our employees. And I think that we'll probably get into some questions later. Like the flu vaccine, we're going to use a similar process, and similar to the flu vaccine, it can have some mild symptoms and side effects. And Dr. Robertson, you want to share a little bit more with regard to those types of side effects?
Sure. And so one of the parts that that maybe is a little unique about this vaccine is that, a certain percentage, just a small percentage, but a certain percentage of the patients enrolled in the trial that received the active vaccine did have side effects. Things like muscle aches, pains, headaches, fevers, feeling flu-like for a day and a half or so. And we've heard that from folks that we know that have been involved in these vaccine trials, as well as the data that is being reported. And so given that, Mike and his team have designed how they will stagger the vaccination of healthcare workers so that we don't, let's just say, vaccinate all the nurses in one of our ICUs at the same time, because there is a chance that a small percentage of them could, not be able to come to work the next day because of, just feeling puny, under the weather. So that's one thing about this vaccine that'll require a little flexibility in terms of how we schedule and vaccinate our frontline healthcare workers. The other thing that I think is interesting about this vaccine is that both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines require a second dose somewhere between 21 and 28 days after the first. So logistically, the challenge will be for health systems that are going to be vaccinating their staff and other healthcare workers or first responders will be synchronizing the second dose so that we're able to deliver the second dose in the appropriate time frame. This vaccine is not mandatory, so it's not being required of our healthcare workers. So if you're a CHI Health employee, you'll have access to the vaccine based on your risk group, and the triage process that Mike's team has put in place, but it's not going to be required. It won't be a condition of employment. the other thing about this vaccine is that it's a novel platform. It's a new technology. And Mike, maybe you could explain, a little bit about how this vaccine works. But we do know that it's highly effective. It's highly efficacious. And Mike can correct me, but I think the 43 or 44,000 people that were in the Pfizer trial, only about 170 actually developed a COVID infection after receiving either the vaccine or placebo. And of that 170, I think the reported number was 8 that were actually people that caught COVID after receiving the actual vaccine. So that tells you how effective this vaccine seems to be, at least in this phase 3 data. Mike, do you want to add anything about the vaccine? And
yeah, like Cliff was saying, it's a novel vaccine, unlike other flu vaccines that we've grown used to over the years, such as those are usually weakened or killed viruses that stimulate an immune response, to cause our body to stimulate an immune response. Well, this vaccine is actually made up of proteins, messenger RNA that will cause our body to create proteins similar to the COVID spike. Now, what that does is then our body then recognizes that COVID spike as a foreign object, and then it rises to the defense to attack that spike. And so not only does it do this for the one that's been created by the messenger RNA, it'll do it against the COVID-19 virus itself, therefore inhibiting it from breaking into our cells and replicating and continuing the spread of the virus. Unlike flu vaccines, where effectiveness at, we consider pretty good effectiveness between 40 and 60%, we're reading that this is 95% effective. And my goodness, what amazing to be able to say that you have this shot, this injection, this vaccine, and then you receive the booster, and there's probably 95% chance that you will not get COVID. So exciting to know that we're moving forward.
Thanks, Mike. So I think we'll end our comments there, and then Taylor, you said you've got some questions for us. If you want to start sharing those, that'd be great.
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and mute somebody here so that doesn't show up in the recording. Okay. We are going to start with talking about the very high success rate that the vaccine has. It's much higher than what we see with the flu shot. So, Mike, if you want to tackle this, how is this possible to have such a high success rate with a vaccine?
Yeah, Taylor, I sort of covered that in that statement, that really it's designed for that specific, it causes our body to make a specific reaction to the spike protein. And so, and on top of that, unlike other flu vaccines, where, we have to plan several months ahead, what is the flu strain that's going to be affecting us this winter? And occasionally we get it right, and occasionally we don't get it right. Sometimes we in the news, the year before last, I think we had a 25 or 33% match rate with regard to the flu vaccine. With this vaccine, since this is a novel and a new way to produce a vaccination with messenger RNA, we have a higher percentage of accuracy identifying what we need to, and have the body elicit the effect that is necessary to fight off the COVID virus.
And I would add to that, one of the things that we don't know yet is how long immunity will be granted. So, it's safe to say that over the next 3 years, we'll learn a lot more about not only the virus, but the vaccine. And this could become something that becomes part of our annual immunizations, like flu shots every year, or it could be a vaccine that gives longer term immunity, where you would only need boosters every so often. I think about like tetanus, where we try to, give boosters at least every 10 years. So we don't know yet about how long this vaccine will provide immunity for the individual that's received it, but it does appear to be highly effective, which is a really good sign in terms of our ability to get ahead of this virus and really lessen the number of critically ill people that end up in our hospitals.
I did forget to mention we're going to try to wrap up by 1:30 today, so we're going to keep moving. The next question: when a manufacturer says a vaccine is 90 to 95 or 97% effective, what exactly does this mean? Is that a good percentage, and would the FDA approve a vaccine that was 75% effective or 65% effective?
Well, I could probably jump in on that one. Wow, that's incredible effectiveness to be up to 95%. And the FDA will probably approve anything greater than 50%. And so this is a very beneficial vaccine that'll be available for our frontline folks and to the general public later in the spring.
The next question has to do with the flu vaccine, and Dr. Robertson, you touched on this, as the COVID vaccine might possibly be an annual shot that we get every year as well. The flu vaccine changes every year as the virus mutates. Will this happen with the COVID vaccine?
I guess that's a possibility. I don't know that anybody is predicting that at this point. And what's different about the flu is there are multiple strains of flu. And so every year, the flu vaccine is essentially our best estimate of what strains will be predominantly infecting Americans. And as Mike had said, it's built 6 months or so in advance. So there's always a chance that the strains that are picked for the flu vaccine may not actually be the ones that predominantly cause infections. But I would say that, this year so far, and maybe, social distancing and masking, but so far our flu activity has been light. We're not seeing much flu activity in Nebraska. And that's a great sign. So, we are still, though, encouraging everybody to get their flu shot, again, because we know that flu vaccines are safe and they do provide benefit. And, we're not yet predicting that we won't still have a flu season on top of COVID.
Dr. Robertson, you started answering the next question I have. So you said we're not seeing a lot of flu activity right now. Is it possible that this is because people are following COVID safety measures? Will there be less transmission of the flu, and any indication more people are getting the flu shot this year?
Well, I can speak to our employees. So, we require the flu vaccine for our employees. And so, pretty much all of our healthcare workers, except for a very rare case, are being vaccinated for influenza. I do think the impact that COVID has had in terms of publicly educating all of us around the benefits of hand washing, social distancing, wearing a mask, I think it is having an impact on the spread of influenza. So we did, early on, earlier in our summer, which is winter in the Southern Hemisphere, there was data coming out of the Southern Hemisphere that flu seasons were light in other parts of the world. So it may be a phenomenon that will replicate itself here, which is that there'll just be fewer cases of influenza this year because of the COVID precautions.
There are now 3 vaccines that are preparing for FDA approval. You mentioned CHI Health is starting with the Pfizer vaccine. Is one believed to be more effective than others? Mike, do you want to tackle this one?
Sure. No, I mean, the first 2 out there with Pfizer and Moderna have the same percentage of effective rates out there. So either or, I would be comfortable with myself receiving. AstraZeneca is the other one out there, and it's still too early to make a decision on that one.
Dr. Robertson, you mentioned symptoms and side effects from getting both doses of the vaccine. Do you believe it's safe, and will you get it?
So yes, absolutely. In fact, I've even offered, if we ran into a situation where people were concerned and weren't getting vaccinated, I'd be happy to be first in line. Now, I don't qualify because I'm not a bedside caregiver, and I don't meet any of the other risk groups. So I'll probably be 5th or 6th in line on Mike's triage methodology that they've designed. But that's because we're trying to actually get the vaccine into the people that it'll help most, and obviously frontline caregivers fit that bill. but a long way to say, no, I'd be happy to be first in line to get the vaccine. Should that be helpful and encouraging other people to be vaccinated?
Mike, what is the projected timeline for the public to have access to the vaccine? And do we know how many doses CHI Health is expected to receive?
You know, the timeline for the public is I think the best we can say is late spring, when we receive sufficient enough doses to do mass vaccinations. Whether it's Moderna or Pfizer, we do have the space to capacity to store those and be able to distribute those. And the second portion of that was, I forgot, Taylor.
Did you just answer how many we expect to receive, and then?
You know, we don't know for sure. We're getting numbers from the that it could be 15,000 doses in the initial shipment to the state of Nebraska. It's not a huge number of doses, but it is sufficient enough to cover our first line workers and start the process. So.
But March and April is our best guess for when the general public will receive it. Next question, what would you say to people who are hesitant to get this shot? How do we know it's safe? Dr. Robertson, you touched on this a little, but if you want to elaborate.
Well, you know, I think we need to understand that the FDA is made up of career professionals that are scientists that really aren't going to make a decision that isn't in the best interest of the general public. And so, in spite of the politics that seem to have gotten in the middle of the discussion, I think I'm very comfortable, and I know firsthand that the professionals that make up the FDA are going to do the right thing, and they wouldn't release a vaccine that wasn't felt to be safe, for the general public. Like anything, there will be data collected, like any trial or any medicine, there will be data that will continue to be collected once the vaccine is made available to the public. And so their database will continue to grow over time. But I would also say that, these trials are unique in the sense that they're very large. Like the 43,000 in the Pfizer trial is substantially more data than the FDA would normally receive, from a phase 3 clinical trial on a vaccine. And obviously things have moved faster because this is a public health crisis that we're dealing with. But I think the technology, I think the data, and I know for sure the scientists that will ultimately make the recommendation can be trusted and should be trusted. And that's what I would say to anybody that was hesitant about the vaccines.
Mike, we need some clarification. I believe you were saying that the state is expected to get 15,000 doses, not just CHI. Can you clarify?
That is what I've heard, just the state at this time. And then it'll be split up amongst the facilities that have the ultra low freezer. And how that's going to be split up, yet to be determined.
Okay, and then other clarification is, are you saying CHI staff could start being vaccinated as early as December 14th?
The week of December 14th. We do have everything in place to start vaccinations, minus the vaccine. So once we get that in place, and we make sure we review all of our processes, everything is ready to go, and we're comfortable with the process, then we're going to start vaccinating.
The next question is, what percentage of the population would need to get the vaccine in order for us to stop wearing masks, Dr. Roberts?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we're organizationally spending time trying to think through the answer of that exact question, because it has an impact operationally. What I would say is that, we don't know how many people that are out there that have been infected or with symptoms or either asymptomatic that might also have some immunity. Suffice it to say that it needs to be a substantial portion of our community needs to get vaccinated or needs to be infected to have immunity to allow us to begin to approach that sort of place in the lifespan of this virus that would that would cause the viral infections to begin to decrease and decrease more rapidly than they are today. So I'm speculating, but I would say as a rule of thumb that we really need about half the population immune, either through infection or through vaccine, to really begin to see a different trajectory in the course of this pandemic.
Mike, can you talk about how the vaccine will be shipped to CHI Health?
Well, it's going to be shipped in ultra low, in containers that are able to maintain an ultra low temperature. That's minus 70 degrees Celsius. And they'll have temp tracking devices in there to assure that the vaccine did not go above that ultra low temperature. And I was just going to add one more thing when it comes to the numbers that we may receive in the state. I mean, that's something that changes frequently. Those are estimated numbers, and the closer we get to December 14th, the better we'll have a handle on the exact number.
Next question is, how will the vaccine change your operating procedures or the way you do business, or will it, Dr. Robertson?
Probably not for a while. And so until we see a pretty dramatic decrease in the number of in the amount of community spread of the virus, so the number of new cases on a daily basis, the number of infections, number of hospitalizations, until those numbers really decline substantially, we probably will continue to require masking in our hospitals, to really stress social distancing, hand washing. But it'll be the viral count, the virus counts, the infection counts that'll really drive us. But hopefully by the time we get to this point of next year, we'll all be experiencing what we might describe as more of our old normal in terms of how we're living, how we're working, those kind of things. So there's still so much to be found out about this virus. Again, we don't know how long natural immunity might last if you've been infected. We don't know yet how long immunity from the vaccine will last. So there's still a lot of data that's out there that's yet to be generated that will ultimately paint the picture of how this pandemic comes to an end.
Why is the flu vaccine required for employees, but the COVID vaccine will not be required?
Predominantly because the COVID vaccine is new, it's novel, different than the influenza or the flu vaccine where we've had decades of experience. Our organization made a decision that, given that this is a new infection, a new virus, and a new vaccine, that we would not require it for everyone, but that we strongly encourage it.
And Dr. Robertson, I think this is a good question for you as well. Just as a morale boost, what does the vaccine mean for frontline staff?
Well, I think it's not just frontline staff, it's probably everybody in the community and anybody that works or owns a business. We all are tired. Everybody has COVID fatigue. In particular, our healthcare workers really hope that this vaccine is sort of the beginning of the end, if you will. As I've said on our previous calls, our folks have been working around the clock for months now, and they're tired. They get up every day, they put their scrubs on, and they head back into battle, but they are tired and they're ready for a break. And so I think for all of us, so it's not just healthcare workers, I think for the entire community, the fact that these vaccines appear to be so highly effective really starts to provide some hope that maybe in a handful of months, 6 months, 8 months from now, we'll be back to a more normal way of life. It's yet to be seen, but that's the hope, and I do think that gives everybody energy, including our healthcare workers.
This will be the last question we have on the vaccine, and then we have just a couple questions on a different subject before we wrap up here. Do we know what the cost of these freezers are, and will patients have to cover any of that cost?
Well, I certainly do know the cost of those freezers, and in comparison to what we've done with the virus and the pandemic, the freezers are running around $10,000. It's not a huge dollar amount that we need to put forward to stem this entire pandemic. So hopefully that answers your question.
Anything to add to that, Dr. Robertson?
I think the question about, are the costs of the freezers going to be passed on to the patients? I think that was what was being alluded to. And no, the answer to that is no.
Okay, and then moving on to questions unrelated to the vaccine. We're hearing that Lincoln hospitals are suggesting that nursing homes, assisted living, and long-term care facilities keep their COVID-19 patients in-house rather than send them to the hospital, which is a change from the past. Is that the case? Dr. Robertson.
Yeah, I guess I'll answer that one. I'm not aware of any different new direction from the state or even from the local health departments. So, I think if there's facilities that have concerns, they need to work with their local health departments in the state. But heretofore, that whole process, and we've taken numerous patients, since March that have come from nursing homes or assisted living facilities, and where we kind of where we hold them because of COVID, even if they're not, ill or ill enough to be admitted to the hospital. But that's been something that's really been led by the ICAP team, the ICAAP team, and the state. So I would, whoever's asking that question, I would encourage them to go back to the state, because I don't believe there's been new direction, at least not that I'm aware of.
And then the last question we have time for today is about the bamlanivimab infusions. Can you update us on the use of the infusions? And do you think your allocated amount has been helping to reduce the number of hospitalizations?
Well, let me take that one. Yet to be determined whether or not the infusions are reducing the hospitalizations. The intent is to do such. We do have sufficient supply. There's a process in place to have the patients infused, and it's being infused throughout our division, our CHI health system. So we have sufficient supply, and it is being utilized.